My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting a Marine Corps vet turned procurement and supply chain practitioner, turned management consultant, turned forest analyst, turned Airbase strategist, turned HBR advisor, turned founder of his own current venture, Matchat, a modern procurement private member and partner network, leveraging the power of people to shift the perception of procurement. We're pleased to have him here today, sharing his diverse breadth of experience with our listener base. Mathew, also known as Matt Schulz. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It's so funny to hear that being like your bio being read out. It's just like, what? Because you don't always think about it. Like you look, like I appreciate it. I mean, I guess I did those things, right? I've done those things and I'm doing them, but at the same time, you're like, you know, it feels, I don't know, maybe I'm of a certain generation where I'm like, I don't know.
Well, you're a humble guy, maybe. How about this, Matt? Let's start off with wondering, I mean, how did you stumble into the space of procurement and supply chain, you know, coming from out of your background in the military?
Yeah. It's a good question, right? I think a lot of people often ask, and heck, I've even written about this on LinkedIn, right? Like procurement doesn't, like you don't choose procurement, it chooses you. People just fall into it or through some boss or colleague. It's like, oh yeah, you might be good at this. I think I actually chose it. And it's weird because, you know, to your point, I started off in the military, which like going right out of high school as an 18-year-old kid into the Marines, totally different than most. Usually it's like college. I ended up doing that after the fact. But it's like this non-linear path is what ended up leading me towards it. So the military, basically like 8 years of leadership training. And then I jump into school and I chose economics. I love this idea of micro, understanding how businesses worked, macro, the larger economy. Same thing through grad school. And I landed in the public sector and started doing like technology. And I was like, every time I needed to buy something or implement it, like procurement was there. I was like, who are these people? What is going on? So I dug into it and I was like, whoa. And then it's like, okay, now this micro macro economics makes sense. Holy cow, what's up with procurement? I'm interested. The rest is kind of history.
You said that it was a non-linear path into what some would maybe say is a rather linear role. Do you think that procurement is linear, or do you think it's rather dynamic?
Well, interesting. I think if you look backwards, probably pretty linear in that most who get in start off as like, I don't know, I can't even keep up with like the titles these days. You're like administrative support, specialist, analyst, manager, associate director, VP, you know, it's like, it's very, very structured, very formal. And I think you hear from a lot of people, at least back in the day, it was like, oh yeah, I'm really good at organization. So I'm good at that, right? I can figure out how to do approvals. I can figure out how to keep things organized in Excel spreadsheets and things like this. It feels like it's changing. I hope it is. I had a lot of success by doing it differently. And so to me, I think it's more dynamic now, especially as modern tools continue to hit the market because they're automating a lot of those organizational or administrative efforts.
Definitely. When you jumped into this world, you jumped in with, you know, both feet, and now you're in the space of building a community, which I'd love to talk more about. For those that aren't familiar, though, with what you're doing at Matchat, could you just provide a brief overview?
Yeah, of course. I think, look, and you and I talked a little bit about this before we even jumped on, right? It's like, it feels as though there are a lot of communities out there, which I can appreciate. There are, or is it just like one? Like, is it the procurement supply chain community, or do we have these pockets? It's probably a bit of both. And Matchat, we have a unique take on it. And for us, I've overemphasized on purpose next generation. I think you've got a few communities out there that are working with people that are in it now or have been in for 10, 20, 25, 30 years. Whereas if you start looking ahead to the future, and that's where I usually live, especially after doing a stint at Forrester, I'm interested in the future and who the younger next generation is going to be. I think there's a huge opportunity. A couple of stats that came up recently. One was, I think within by the end of the year or something like this, Gen Z will be nearly 30% of the workforce, which is pretty amazing. That's the generation below me, and they think and do things totally different, which I think is exciting.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you tap into that market, that mindset, and bring folks in to hopefully choose procurement, to want to be interested in this space and see just how unique it is as a function. And so that's what Matchat is. It's a place where people can probably feel a little more comfortable in a platform where they're not commenting on LinkedIn publicly or making posts. I know that's not for everybody, but they want to do it in an intimate, safe, supportive space. And that's what Matchat exists for. We also do things like in-person events and meetups. We certainly don't do conferences. Rather, we partner with some of those folks, but just small meetups. And that's a great way to do the in-person as well as digital community.
I love this idea of harnessing the new generation, right? What do you think that procurement needs to do to continue to truly attract the next generation of talents?
I think we're in it. Here's what I think is super helpful. All of the modern tools and technology that have come to the market, say since 2017, 2018. This takes me back to a time where I landed at this PE-backed fintech firm. And we were using a no-code tool to run the majority of our procurement processes, things like intake orchestration, which didn't quite exist. It was kind of there because I knew there was a huge opportunity. And some of the legacy tools, we had this old school Microsoft Dynamics ERP. It was built for manufacturing, and we're a fintech company. And so it was how do we supplement this, or how do we make it better? And I think now, as a result of all of these new tools that have picked up on it and have come to market, it's exciting, it's interesting. And if I'm a millennial, if I'm Gen Z, Alpha, who's coming up in the next, 5-10 years, that's attractive.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of that. It's exciting. And so I always thought okay, if you've got all these people at these modern technology companies who are doing procurement or helping practitioners, when you've got an older generation that's retiring, maybe they leave the procurement technology companies and then become the practitioners. That was always kind of a cool way of thinking about it. Or a lot of folks have been getting a little more public about going to universities and colleges and starting to recruit now and or build it up. Look, selfishly, I also hope that my voice is helping that. And by pulling together what I've been calling a movement of this, more people saying it out loud, getting on podcasts should and or could help. Fingers crossed.
Well, it's an exciting future, I think. I'd like to hear what you think. Crystal ball out. What are some of the biggest opportunities in the space of procurement community, one alike that you're building now in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, it's interesting to think about it because I'd love to live in the 3 to 5 year mark, but I've realized that sometimes that feels like it's too far, right? Things are happening so fast that it's I got to rein it back.
1 to 2 year mark.
Yeah, right. It's now it's 12 to 24 months. Here, let's take a step back. Yeah. You've got supply chain disruptions as a result of COVID. You've got macroeconomic climate, interest rates, sky, right? So procurement and supply chain hits the headlines. You've got all these modern tools that are coming in. And then you start thinking about AI, right? Almost out of nowhere, it feels like AI got public. It's been around, but now it's whoa, OpenAI, ChatGPT, these common right now. You've got all these common platforms. I think as a result of that, it's hard to do the 3 to 5 years. You are at that 12 to 24 month mark. Look, I've vocally said, gosh, there's going to be a lot of changes in the next 36 months. Well, we started seeing companies consolidate. We started seeing companies get bought out, partnering together within the past 12 months. Like that was 2024. And now think of these companies that are getting Series D funding in the hundred of millions. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I'll be curious to see where it goes in 2025. My guess is we'll see some consolidation, but I'm most interested in more AI tools. I think that's next.
It's almost like, just to jump in there, because you made a point that I think is really interesting. It's almost as if the technology and the expectation on what Jason Lemkin, I listened to the SaaStr podcast, which is one that I would recommend to anyone in the B2B SaaS space. Had a podcast episode recently about hyper functionality, right? There's such a pervasive, and I would say day-to-day exposure to AI tools that are able to really make our day-to-day fantastic, right? So that same expectation is going to be on tech companies,
for sure.
SaaS businesses to be able to deliver with hyper functionality, right? I think you could draw almost that exact same line in certain aspects to the way that we are going to expect, how would I say, markets to be able to change and adjust nowadays. Like you just said, right? Like there's going to be a hyper functionality of maybe teams as well, community as well.
For sure.
Trends are not going to be 2, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year trends. They're going to be here and now, and they're going to happen faster and happen quicker, right? And I think that's something that's very interesting to think about. I mean, we saw each other at DPW early this year. Yeah. What were some of your biggest takeaways from that event? I mean, there was so many vendors in the room, and
totally.
And AI was the buzz, of course, but what were your takeaways?
I think I was going to go there. All right. I was going to say, think about DPW. We were both there. There were so many solution providers there. And that's part of it, right? You think of community, it's also, the technology and tools that are there. And it was hard not to go and see a presentation without hearing AI. Not that hasn't been the case for the past 18 months. It certainly has. Though this felt a little different in that, like, the buzzword at the time was agentic, right? It's getting beyond this idea of just what as end users in our personal lives call chatbots. It's like, well, how do I infuse that? How do I put this new technology, this tool, artificial intelligence, on data that I'm living on within the organization, so that I came up with these 3 E's. I can enrich data, I can extract it, and I can now execute on it. And to me, that's super, super important. It's a great way to frame it and think about it. I've got data, how do I make it better? I've got data, how do I pull that out so I can do something with it? And then once I have it, like, actually make better business decisions. That's kind of the goal here. So I think without a doubt, it still feels like a buzzword to most. However, I always ask or question, well, how many AI or ML engineers are you having conversations with? Because when I do, it's mind-blowing. It's really, really impressive. And I also try to stay on top of, like you said, you listen to Jason's podcast or others. It's really, really important to stay up to date and relevant, because it changes so fast and so quickly that the new models come out and it completely erases what we were thinking just 6 months ago. I mean, think of the modality changes on AI. Like, I've got the new phone, right? AI is officially on this thing, and it's pretty amazing. Things that I wasn't able to do before, I can now do, like just search for a type of photo that I want to look at. And it's like, oh, okay, that was from 3 years ago, but it picked up that there was a cow in the photo or something, right? That's important.
Yeah.
And now what does that then look like for B2B? And it's not sitting at the booth and having AI powered on the backdrop. Like, that isn't it. That was pretty cool 12 months ago, because we were thinking about how we were going to use it and understand it. I'll be curious to see where things go. I'm super excited for it for 2025. I can't imagine it remains a buzzword. I'm hoping new models come out soon. They've been teasing it, so we'll see where we're at.
Love it. Love your energy on this. Okay, I have AI apathy personally. I'm kind of like you said, right? AI powered is woof, right?
Yeah.
With that said, I mean, the AI, holds a lot of great, potential applications within the space of procurement, and I understand why people are leading with that.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your side, where do you see, one or two of the most potential impactful applications of artificial intelligence technologies?
I think you're starting to see it in some of the modern tools with this like pre-population. Think of intake orchestration or even on the back end AP automation and invoicing. I'm no longer clicking buttons because it's automatically doing it for me, right? You think of like OCR back in the day, literally being able to scan and read a document or a PDF and then pre-populating. Well, now you throw AI on top of that, and it's even better. It's, the percentages go up even higher to the point where like,
Right.
It used to be just taking a picture of a receipt and it's like, it's done. T&E completely done, which is fantastic. So I think you've got that now. It's only getting better, especially as the new models come out, and these modern technology companies are always updating. And then I always look at it from this idea of proactive procurement. This is something I'm trying to coin here as well, because it's so important to me. It's where I had a ton of success using a simple no-code tool to get ahead of all the things that were coming up. I'm talking like, yes, renewals, but even strategy. Like I would meet with the C-suite, which is almost unheard of. Like who in procurement's meeting with the C-suite? They're not getting that fictitious seat at the table, but it's like, if you show up with proper data and information and tell stories, guess what? They're letting you in. In fact, they're like, can you keep showing up? Because all that stuff you're pulling and extrapolating is helping us make better decisions. So an example would be marketing. I'd pull all the marketing technology, data and information that I had and was sitting on. Again, back to this like enriching and then extracting. I'd go show up to a marketing team meeting with the CMO and her top brass, and we talk through the next 6 months or 12 months. Where are we? What are we doing? Have you heard of this new tool? Should we be looking at new tools? Do you like that demand gen tool? And it was super informative for me, but also for them, because they're thinking like, otherwise you're back into the reactive play again, where it's like, oh gosh, like that renewal is up. We got 30 days. All right, well, just go beat them up and get a better price. Like that's not it anymore. It's, we're so far ahead of this that we know we want to replace it and start doing demonstrations with other tools, or that new AI tool that came out and does it for us. Then you also think about how that affects headcount. And to me, that's way more important. And those are two really, really good examples. One of how it's being used now, and also then how it should. And I think that's where, while we're at DPW, everyone starts talking about agentic. Like, how do I then put it on to enhance the data and information? Of course, the caveat here, the asterisk is like, do you have good data? If you don't,
yeah, forget about it. And I think that actually lead. Yeah, I mean, it leads me
unless
into
you can enrich it.
Right. It leads me into something though that I think is important. Right. Efficiency lies within this holy trinity. Right. It's the sofrito of business. Yeah. It's your people, your process, and your technology, right? Therein lies, true ability for innovation. Which of those pillars, if you have to say, is the most important in a business?
Well, I've said it.
Which is the most important to procurement?
Yeah, I always say like people, process, tech in that order. So for me, it's people. If I've got the right culture, the right people at the helm, gosh, back to this idea of like, I don't know, go Steve Jobs here, right? Like what a pro at pulling people together. And he's got all these famous quotes around culture, and he spent so much time interviewing people because that's what he wanted to do as a CEO and a leader of a business, was how do I bring in these really smart people and then not tell them what to do, but like have them show us what we should be doing. That's why I hired them. And to me, it's so important because I think if you do the same thing, especially within a procurement or supply chain function, someone who sits at the center of the business, if we now look at it that way through a proactive procurement lens, wow, it's totally transformational. No more tactical, just clicking buttons. Like, we're done with that. Use the tools to come in and automate that. So I think people is super important, which then goes into how do I reduce the complexity of these processes that we've had before with ERPs and legacy tools that just were clunky. Like, it's inevitable. They were clunky. They were built yesteryear, is what it is. But if you can then shift that to just making it super, super simple, where it's like the end user is like, I just want to request something, or I just want to take a picture of it with my phone. Done. You can actually make that stuff happen, or should be in the very near future. And ultimately, once you have the right people in place and the idea of simplification, you're using the technology. Those two are kind of tied together at the end to do it for you. And like, what a combination. And so I always say next generation procurement professionals plus modern technology is the future.
Yeah. Fantastic insights. And like you touched on something there that I think is pretty important, and a topic I'd like to dig a little bit more into.
Yeah.
When it comes to the technologies of yesteryear, right? Not everybody has the luxuries of being able to rip out a stack and say, okay, we're going to modernize, right? I mean, some businesses are deep into this game, and we're talking about global multinationals particularly, right? That have been working on the foundations of, you know, we don't need to name names, but a few, maybe two or three big vendors and their ERP and source to pay solutions for years, right? Not everybody has this luxury to be able to have the green field, which I know that you've done in you know, prior. What would you recommend to those individuals, right? Where do they even start when they're in so deep?
Yeah, it is tough. And look, guilty. I know that I usually talk to maybe like a mid-market, SMB, yes, mid-market, early enterprise. This is not like a Fortune 100 all the time. This conversation, a lot of times it's like, okay, well, great, Matt, but that doesn't work for me. I don't know that that's always the case. I think you can always start with pockets. Can you try it out with a particular function? Can you adopt a new modern tool for one specific area? Because then you can show it. Think of it as like a in-depth proof of concept. Like, if I can prove this thing out, and yes, like I'm hitting my major savings KPIs, but also showing efficiencies throughout, that's super important. I think the C-suite is more open to something like that, willing to make an investment if you can show and prove it out. Is it easy? No, like, it's not easy. Don't sugarcoat it. It's not easy. It's hard to do. It takes the right person, people, leadership team to be able to do this. You're almost selling and marketing procurement within the organization. Super important. And I think it'll become more and more important the further we go down the road. So I think there are ways to do it. You just have to think creatively about it. That's one I've seen actually happen before, whether it's even just implementing like a new CLM, contract lifecycle management tool, right? Like, start small. Or, you know, think of enterprise. You've got companies adopting intake orchestration on the front end of all of this stuff, and everyone gets comfortable with it because as an end user, I'm looking at a tool that's got a nice user interface, and I'm going, gosh, that reminds me of like my everyday life on my laptop. I like that. So you've got that as well. It'll be interesting, that's for sure. I'd like to see.
I think so as well. I was actually sorry, keep on.
Nothing. I was just going to say, like, I'd like to see them adopt it faster and sooner. I know that's not often the reality, and it's going to be hard because you've built up teams of like 100 practitioners, right? Like, massive, tons of people doing category management, but that, I don't know that that's going to be the case in where we at 12 or 24 months, certainly 36, 3 to 5 years. I mean, I think it's going to change faster than we think. And it becomes the competitive advantage. Like, if you're not doing it, what do you, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. I think that there was, you were just making me think a little bit, you know, about kind of the adoption of technology and also how technology adoption, I think, has shifted throughout the years, right? If we look back 5 years ago, everybody was talking about one thing and one thing only in procurement: digital transformation. Maybe about 6-7 years ago, right? This was the big word, right? Hashtag digital transformation. Sure. I was also guilty of it. Like, we were at the start of a movement and we felt it, right? It was like a revolution happening. The issue was, I think, is that it's planted this seed that every digital application needs to be a transformation, where in reality, we've entered a totally new era of user centricity, right? And when the user stands in the center, they don't give a crap about the broader transformation if their user-centric experience is not good, right? And I think that this is a very interesting time within the space of procurement, but also just technology in business. I wanted to ask you, what is some of the things that are coming up in forums like that? I know that it's a private network, but what are some of the conversations? What are the big topics that people are talking about right now in Matchat?
So let's go full on digital transformation, because I love that topic, and I've often brought it up in a way in which, like, it's still a thing, and I'm hesitant to call it a buzzword because it's probably important not to call everything a buzzword, and you really do want to transform the business digitally. In fact, you should always be doing that because it's a way to remain efficient and back to that competitive advantage.
Exactly.
So it's topical, right? And I'll go on a little bit of a tangent here, just because I'm not exclusively in the procurement space. What I am, however, I think it's good to reference other functions. Think of sales. Think of marketing. Like, these are great places to explore because they usually adopt technology much faster. There are certainly so many more solutions available to them. And I feel like they're always, quote unquote, ahead of the curve. Now, marketing and sales are revenue driven, and that's probably why they get a different look and why there are more companies in that space, just basic economics. However, if procurement starts thinking about becoming transformational instead of tactical, you too can do that. And the tangent will make sense here in a moment. When I was at Forrester or a fintech company standing up their procurement function from scratch, I would align the purchases, the renewals, to revenue. Not only was it, we saved like $50K on that $200,000 deal, but we also partnered with marketing to bring in a new tool, and the ROI on that for them over the next year, 2 or 3 should be $1.5 million. Okay, now we're having a different type of conversation. You're speaking to the C-suite and their language, the dialect that they speak in, because they take that and go to the board. And next thing you know, procurement hears their words at a board meeting, and you're going, whoa, that's pretty impactful, super important. So I think, again, back to digital transformation, it's why it's so important for procurement to adopt new tools and stay on top of them, also for the rest of the organization. That's part of the job. We literally buy the goods and services for the business to be in business. And I think we often forget that. So that comes up. I think a lot of people back in the day, in the way in which you and I were thinking about it, digital transformation was more like change management. It was like, I adopt a new tool, and then it's like, well, how do I get people to come into this thing? And I feel like that was a problem. I think that in and of itself became the thing. It was more about change management than actually adopting the new tool. And maybe, now that I think about it, it's like, maybe the technology just wasn't quite there yet 6 years ago, whereas now it is. And did we ever think AI was going to be as powerful as it is now within the past 24 months? Eventually, yes. As quickly, gosh, I don't know.
No, I mean, that there's been definitely a parallel within maturity for digital solutions and technologies capabilities and applications of emerging technologies into
different types.
Different types exactly of tech. But I think that it's interesting to hear a little bit more about what are some of the ins and outs of what you guys are doing at Matchat, because community is so important. But I'm curious also, like, what role do suppliers play, maybe in Matchat's community, but also just like in the procurement community?
For sure. I love this because it's such a big component and part of the job that we'd be remiss to skip it. I think right now there is such a hyper focus on, I don't want to say ourselves, but to some extent, because we're trying to figure out, practitioners say this day in and day out, like, I don't understand the tools. What are they? How do I know? There are so many. Like there's a confusion. There's a sense of overwhelm with it. And so I think again, within the next 12 or 24 months, we'll see a tighter track on some of these more standout tools and solutions. But we often then forget about the daily activities of the procurement team and practitioner, which is, I'm helping out my internal stakeholders get those tools that they need and services to do their job. So that's back to the vendor relationships, the supplier relationships, which to me, that's the fun part. I want to grab a new modern tool and automate all the tactical stuff, administrative stuff we've been doing, so I can focus on that. And that's why people, again, like back to people, why it's so important. We need people who can tell stories, who can build relationships, who can network, who can connect. And it's not just within procurement. It's business. Do you have connections in marketing, sales, HR, finance? They're all super important to have. And I think that often gets overlooked right now. A lot of people are struggling to understand it because we're so hyper-focused on the tools for ourselves, which will be important and is important. But think about the connections you need from the vendors you buy from to stay in business. Like the R&D team still needs all of their tools to build out the SaaS solution. Are you partnering with them day in and day out to make sure that they've got the things that they need to do their job? So yeah, it's pretty important.
Yeah. And I think that procurement as a function, it's incredibly important as that glue between so many stakeholders internally, and also the glue between the business and the supply chain, right? The market on the other side of the coin of sales, right? And equally as important too, in a lot of businesses, the bottom and top line as sales is as well. I mean, it's very important that procurement, partners and has the right perception. Perception's reality. I'm just curious from your side, what do you think is the general perception of procurement today, right now? Are we on the up and up? Because I feel like we are, but I don't know what's being talked about in the forums, right? I mean, is it a positive tonality?
Yeah. Great question. I think it's a really, really important one. Look, I love that we're doing this. Did podcasts in procurement exist a handful of years ago? Maybe one or two. Now you've got a plethora, which is great. We're getting more vocal about it. You've got more creators creating content on LinkedIn and other social platforms. You've got communities popping up, which is really good. So yeah, I think there's this general trend upwards, particularly within the function. And I think that's starting to permeate throughout the business and throughout companies, so that the old narrative of the cost saving center, the spend police, like, I hope it's dissipating. I know I tongue in cheek make fun of it. But I think that then resonates with the people who have historically thought of the function as that. And now they go, oh my gosh, you're really helping me get the things I need so that I can do my job. You're helping me look good when you go to the C-suite and talk about all the revenue we're going to generate. And I hope that the narrative is changing. I mean, there's a lot of cool events and conferences that are popping up. You've got the podcast, people using social media. Just generally, I want to say and feel as though we are making a difference.
I think so. And I think that it's important that procurement professionals feel that way as well, right? Feel empowered, feel inspired. You've had like a very unique experience in your career, being able to have the opportunity to stand up a procurement team and really have truly seen some high performing procurement teams. I mean, when starting a procurement org, there's a plethora of things you can get done, right? Where to start? I mean, I'm tired just thinking about it. So let me ask you, how did you approach that when you had the opportunity to do so?
Yeah. this was probably like 6, maybe 9, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I threw out this post on LinkedIn. I was like rifling through my, I got a new laptop. So I'm rifling through my old one and I found my 30, 60, 90 day plan. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this was super cool. I was asked to do this over and over again, to come in at a director or VP level to stand it up. You know, they want to like make sure you know what you're doing. I was like, I'm going to give this thing away. So I was like, threw this post out. Hundreds and hundreds of people asked for it. And so that tells me everything that you're asking. It's super important to have that, especially if you're going to stand up a function or if you want to come in and try and transform it. Like, what do you do when you come in? And, you know, I often talk about these like qualities or skills of the practitioner. Like, you got to build relationships. You've got to be literate in technology, and you've got to have some business acumen, right? I think if you've got those 3 pillars, you've got a great foundation to build off of. Then to get more tactical, you throw that 30, 60, 90 day on, which for me was always this idea of like the first 30 days, I'm using that relationship building. I'm spending as many hours as I possibly can to meet as many people as possible throughout the entire organization. Different ranks, different levels, you name it, it didn't matter. I wanted to know not only who was buying what and what was going on, I'll get there, but it was, I want to know these people and to assess how they felt about procurement, if they've ever worked with it, do they know who we are, what we do. It was a major opportunity to start educating within the first 30 days. Now, while that was happening, I was working with finance and other folks to pull data and information to get to the next part, which is like kind of this lay of the land. Who are we buying from? What are we buying? How? Why? What is it? Because with the relationships and then all this data and information, by the day, you know, by the 3rd month, as I'm hitting 90 days, I'm hitting the quote unquote low hanging fruit because we're finding consolidation efforts. I'm going back to the CMOs and the heads of HR and the CFO and saying, hey, look, that relationship we built or started, I got all this data. Can I share that with you? Yeah, they're like, come back in. Yeah. What do you got? We're saving millions of dollars within the first 6 months and just starting to build out this foundation. Then you start thinking about, okay, what tool do I need to bring in? Who's going to complement me? Because I can't do this all by myself, but I need the right analyst or the right specialist or the right whomever to come in and complement me so that we can do this. Because by month 12, we want to have all of this stuff set up so we continue the maturity level. A lot of people will say, and I'll agree, you know, it takes like 3 or 4 years to like hit that. You've got the first year, which is 30, 60, 90. And then the next 9 months, I'm heads down doing all the work and building everything out. And then the next 2 years are, how do I mature that? Where do I pull in more stakeholders? Where do I pull in more tools? Yeah, that's my favorite part of the job. I love doing that. Like if I'm a practitioner, I'm doing that over and over again.
It's an incredibly exciting opportunity, one that I'm sure that many would, you know, really
for sure
die to be able to be in the position of. At the same time, when hearing you, right, it kind of inspired me a little bit. 30, 60, 90 does not have to be from day 0, right? 30, 60, 90 could also be from year 5. And then you determine,
for sure,
I need to set up a new 30, 60, 90. You know, we in the SaaS space, you know, we work with OKR frameworks, 3 main objectives, key results that lead to those initiatives on a quarter by quarter basis that work towards those objectives. So in reality, you know, we're working towards the 30, 60, 90 every single quarter, right? And I think that I hope that those that are listening in can also be inspired that 30, 60, 90 doesn't need to be from day 0, right? You don't need to be the first hire in the procurement org to be able to make a change, right? It's about taking the leap and going back, like you talked about, right? Going back to the basics, but having one thing in focus, which is the people in the organization, and going out and getting to know them, coupling that with data, and then execute, right? And I think that again, it goes back to the people, process, and the technology.
I was going to say, you just, that's it. It's people, process, tech over and over and over again. You're just reiterating on it because it changes, especially now, faster and faster. And gosh, you even made me think about going back to like the question about enterprises, like how can they do it? like do this. Go back through and run through what it would be like to change something or pretend as if it's brand new. What if you had that opportunity to do it? And don't let I don't have time or bandwidth, like no excuses. This will help better you and your entire team. And I think it's a great exercise. Like I've said, this stuff it's not getting easier. Like I don't think procurement's getting easier, but it will get better for the people who are willing to adopt this new mindset and narrative and the way of doing it. I love it. I think a lot of people are yearning for it. They just need to do the thing. Like just start.
Yeah, start somewhere, right? Because otherwise you get stuck
For
in
sure.
this paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
You get stuck in this, I'm too busy, I don't have the bandwidth, just as you mentioned, right?
Yep.
And I think that it's so important to try and break out from that. And that might mean letting the fires burn, right? I have said this now on a few episodes, but I heard in a podcast recently, I can't remember who it was that I'm quoting, but when things start to scale, there's little fires everywhere. Your job doesn't become to determine what fires to put out. It's to determine what fires can you let burn, right? And I think that that's a very impactful thing to remember. Whether you're in sales or marketing or in the procurement function, whether you're in a SME, whether you're in a mid-market, or for example, in the enterprise as well. Matthew, I could talk to you all day.
Yeah,
I really could. And I apologize. I would want you to make a point as well. I just was curious because you know you've had a very diversified career, right? Like going from you know starting your career in the military to winding up where you are today, you know, as a founder of a modern procurement private member and partner network. It's a very interesting, you know, kind of path that you've taken. Some time as an analyst, some time working with strategy. I'm just curious, what's one thing that you know today that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career?
Oh my gosh. A heavy hitting question. I know it's been a privileged path. Looking back, I think very few have been able to do those things. Standing up as a practitioner, technology implementation, consulting, analyst, like I know that doesn't happen for everybody, much less getting into the procurement technology space and helping do strategy. I think what helped, regardless of where I was, and look, this may not be anything new. I'm defaulting back to people. It's so important because I still talk to connections and networks from 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I think part of this idea around community and partner network was probably because I'm likely building the thing I wish I had when I was coming up or going through this nonlinear path. It was like, well, how do I network? How do I build these connections? Yes, within procurement, but also outside of it. And so I think this is the way to do it. Look, I'm not building any technology. Rather, I'm building a movement and community. I think it's super important to have the two and marry them together. And in doing this, I hope it helps other people. It certainly helps me still to this day. And so I wish I probably would have started sooner or emphasized it even more, but I'm happy to be where I'm at right now. And so if there's anything anyone is trying to pull or take from this, I hope that's it. Just start. It will help you 12, 24, 36 months down the road, and you never know what it looks like further in your career if you're just starting out. Those connections, they really become more of a lifeline than anything.
Fantastic words of wisdom, and so happy to have you be a part of our community in procurement and also now the community of the way we source guests. We were so happy to have you on, Matt. Before I let you go, I want to do a quick fire round with you. One word or one sentence answers about everything and anything that is not about procurement, sourcing, and the people and community of it. Is that okay?
Let's go for it. I'm so nervous right now.
Don't be. If you weren't going to work within procurement, and this is kind of a throwaway question because you worked with so many different things, but what was your dream job when Matt Schulz was a little kid?
Oh my gosh. For some reason, I liked this idea of spy.
Okay. Very exciting.
Yeah. One word, spy.
What is your favorite band and or musical artist? Yes.
Oh, I'm going Tupac for sure.
All right. One book or podcast, personal or professional, that you would like to propose to our listeners as their next read or listen?
Podcast? I've been on Diary of a CEO a lot lately. Stephen Bartlett, I think he's doing some great things there. Very business oriented or self-improvement, which I like.
Very nice. All expenses paid trip tomorrow. You can head off by yourself. You can bring your family. It's up to you. Where are you going?
Oh, jeez. Head back to Europe.
All right. Anywhere particular?
All of it? I don't have anywhere in particular. I don't know where I picked this up, but somebody told me this French word and I'm probably saying it wrong. Flaneur, which is just somebody who walks around aimlessly in a city to kind of absorb it and learn it. So if that gives you any indication of how I travel or like to do vacation, that's it. Like, I just want to show up and like, I'm going to go left and then right. And you just inevitably end up hitting up all these cool spots and all the touristy stuff regardless.
Well, I'm happy that you took a left and a right directly into today's pod. Tell the people what you're doing, where it is that they can get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more about Matchat, being a member of Matchat, but also just getting to be a part of your great community and network.
Well, yeah, I hope you're willing and or interested. You can find us at matchat.io. And look, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'm only ever a DM away, so hit me up.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt, for being on today's episode.
Appreciate it, Sam. Thank you.